Hi everybody. I don't actually have enough time alone, but I'm trying to squeeze this one in because I thought some of you might appreciate it. And so if I suddenly have to disappear, that's probably why. So this is the medieval Scapini tarot. I can't quite remember which years, but I know that there are two editions, one vintage one from the 80s and one a bit more recent ones, and the difference is in the quality of that gold in the background there. I did not trim this, someone else did. I would not have the heart to touch this deck because it's one of my absolute favorite. I have two, one the older edition and one a newer edition, and when I do have the time to dig through my collection or the next batch of my collection, I will show you the difference. I received this as a gift during a trade, and even though I already own a couple of decks, a couple of copies rather, I was more than happy and ecstatic to receive this trim version because it's just so delightful. So what she's done is basically cut the cards to the closest possible border of the artwork itself. So if you Google the images of Scapini, medieval Scapini, you'll see this rope, what do you call this thing here, all the way around the image with a bit of gap like that on both sides of the rope, on this side like that, and then the border itself like that. So what she did is cut essentially as close as possible to the image itself without cutting the numbers and the titles. And the result is this elongated, small-ish deck, which I really love, like the Onasa House, like the Corte dei Tarocchi. This I love elongated decks. I'm not quite sure why. So I should respond to that tag, the trim decks. I think I have a couple. I have a few decks, which unfortunately I've given some of them away. But there's a few left that just completely transform the way the deck look. The way a deck looks. I am not one of those people who trim everything. I only trim when it enhances the artwork. In the case of the medieval Scapini, I actually think that the border remaining intact doesn't interfere with the artwork, but having the borders cut like this really give it a different feel because the shape of the deck changed and shuffling it feels different, and I like them both. I certainly would not touch my two copies, but if I have a third copy, or if I were to do this, I would have had to buy a third copy. That's the Hanged Man. Scapini, if you look at the artwork here and you feel that this looks familiar, is because he is the artist who's commissioned to create the quote-unquote missing cards from the Visconti's Forza deck, the third edition. I will show that to you in a separate video. And so even the little booklet, this one here, said that if Scapini were to live in the Renaissance, surely someone like the Viscontis would have commissioned him to do their cards for them. As you can see, the color purple and the color turquoise, and I love those colors, that kind of colors. They weren't available back then, I think. I think those pigments are modern creations, so those kind of pigments. I know blue and gold supposed to be the blues in the Visconti decks are very expensive. I think blue pigments in those days were quite expensive in paintings, so a lot of blues are used to position the patron as someone who's powerful and as someone who has the resources to command a lot of blue pigments in their artwork. I just love Scapini. I think he's quite funny. A lot of his depiction, especially in the minors, are quite funny. There is another deck by him. I don't know whether the deck is by him, but the artwork is certainly by him, called the Bacchus Tarot. and not to be confused with the Vandenborre. I can never remember whether you pronounce Vandenborre or Vandenborre with an at the back. So I love that sort of turquoisey, magenta, purple colors. They're a few of my most favorite colors. So the aces, I have no title, and it goes all the way with no bars, with no banner at the bottom. So the aces are just illustration. And so Scapini's way of illustrating the minors really put a whole spin and give a whole other layer to the term illustrated minors. They're certainly illustrated. There are certainly scenes around it. And this reminds me very much of the Wild Unknown, which is something, it's not a deck I would consider to be a pip deck. I would consider the Wild Unknown to have a scene around the minors, around the pips. So I guess it is a pip deck, but it's with a scene around it. So Robert M. Place termed these quote-unquote scenic minors as having figures and artwork interacting with the suit. And so these guys are definitely interacting with the suit, but in a slightly different manner than, say, the Rider-Waite-Smith and a lot of modern decks are with the minors. So the figures here definitely interact with the elements or with the pips, but they definitely interact around the pips rather than the pips, or rather than the items being submerged in the world of the characters. It is the characters who are submerged in the world of these things, of the pips or of the suit. So 8 of Wands here, let's say 8 of Wands is usually in the Rider-Waite-Smith system is swift movement, right? Something depicting a movement that is really swift. This doesn't look like it. And so let's have a look at what the booklet says. The booklet, for me, feels like after describing the card, it sort of went its own way in terms of what it quote-unquote means. And so for me, it's a bit disjointed, and so I ignore the description here. So let's see the description. 8 stakes support vines bearing ripe grapes. Soon wine will be made in the village. Among the vines, in the foreground, a youth declares his love to a coy woman. Let me focus this for you. I'm sorry the lighting is a little... I have to turn the light on because it's very rainy, it's very cloudy outside. In the middle, the same couple is seen fighting, kicking, slapping, and biting. At the top, a boy and a girl play, running and weaving in and out among the vines. The children wear blue and red like the couple. So that's a really good description of what's going on in the card. Sometimes it's informative, sometimes it's stating the obvious, and then this is the divinatory meaning. Swift activity, sudden progress or movement speed, hastily made decisions to rapid advancement. That to me feels like it has nothing to do with what we're looking at here, but very much describing the Rider-Waite-Smith 8 of Wands. So it's almost as if after the description made by either the artist or somebody else, it feels almost as if everything else is a cut and paste from a standard Rider-Waite-Smith booklet. Again, this is the 10 of Wands. There is somebody, and you can see that robbers here waiting to rob this guy here who is carrying a lot of stuff. So the description says something along that line where there's a merchant traveling and there's all these robbers along the way. And then, of course, the 10 of Wands proceeded, or the booklet proceeded to talk about that heavy burden and all that. I suppose you could make it work. You can say that heavy burden and that challenge in front of you. But then if you see, a lot of us read the 10 of Wands as the end of that burden. You see the end, you see the light at the end of the tunnel. Here, he's just beginning he's just almost starting to face that challenge instead of at the end of it or in the middle of it. So to me, that's less than ideal, and it makes me wonder, looking at his Bacchus tarot as well, Scapini's take on the minors are very much not Rider-Waite-Smith, and I at the moment haven't had the chance or the inclination to focus on Marseille style reading involving the minors. At the moment I'm focusing on the majors only, so I read majors only with a lot of Marseille style, Marseille inspired pip decks, those old woodblock printed decks. I read just with the majors at the moment. But I would be quite keen to know from any of you who are more used to reading the minors in the Marseille tradition, whether this might be the, his take on the Marseille, his take on the minors might be more of that school of thoughts, like perhaps like the Honasa House and Jodorowsky and Bendoff and the rest of them. So I would love to hear from you if you see any of the patterns here that indicate, that can help us understand, or that indicate that style of reading. My bet at the moment would be that he is perhaps more used to Marseille style minor reading of the minors. It'd be quite good to have a confirmation of that though. I find it comical, just very comical, the way, and he often put the people that he knows, like his wife and himself, into the cards, into the artwork. I suspect the Emperor might be him. I'll come back to that. I really do love his artwork. He's very humorous. You see the composition is Marseille for sure, right? 9 and then 1. Instead of at the top, it's at the bottom. So I would hesitate to, I would be inclined to ignore the booklet other than for a clearer description of what we're looking at. For example, the Knight of Cups here. Let's say, because he looks pretty old, usually he's described as very young and dashing and a bit of a player. Knight of Cups, the infamous Rasputin. Okay, so this is Rasputin. The infamous Rasputin, advisor to the last Tsarina of Russia, rides a sneering mule over dry, stony ground. He wears the habit of the monks of Mount Athos, but his heavy boots and the fastening of his coat indicate lawlessness and wealth. With his left hand he holds the reins of the mule and points outward toward the card reader. A large silver chalice decorated with Cupid bending his bow in his right hand. A crowd of peasants advances in the background. So, yeah, I sort of recognized a few characters. Like this one here is from The Birth of Venus by Botticelli, except that she isn't naked and she seems to be wearing the habit of a nun, at least from the neck up. So let's take a look at what the Queen of Cups says. 3 vessels float on the sea, a galleon, a shell, and a small paper boat with the artist's name. On the shell, in the same position as Botticelli's Venus, a nun stands. She wears gauzy pink veils around her body, and the blue veil around her head is crowned with hearts and a gold band. In her left hand she holds a large green cup composed of wings and the head of a cherub. Some of her long blonde hair has come loose and ruffles in the wind. And I personally would stop there and try to interpret that myself. I think this is Pope Leo X. Let me have a look. It is indeed Pope Leo X. The king, dressed in red and yellow, sits on a papal throne. He has the features of Pope Leo X, the great nepotist pope of the Renaissance. Yes, indeed he was. He wears red and green hose with garters embroidered with hearts. His hands are clad in pink gloves. In his right hand he holds a large cup shaped like a papal tiara, and with his left hand he clasps the hand of a fair blonde angel who holds a Chinese sunshade that shelters the king. The angel, who is like an altar boy, wears a pale blue robe covered by a white surplice, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, embroidered with seashells. Under the king's feet are renderings of Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. In the background is the dome of St. Peter's Cathedral of Rome, and the bust of Venus de Milo is on the right. Fascinating stuff, just fascinating. So I quite like that he does that. It just expand your, I feel, your reading potential when the story is rich, and the story is indeed rich. But I would hesitate once more. I can't stress enough. I think we may have to move away from the Rider-Waite-Smith understanding, at least with the minors. But if you have a different experience, I would love to hear how your experience have been, because I know people who love this deck who read, my understanding is that they read strictly Rider-Waite-Smith. So for some reason, I want to say Don Quixote here, Knight of Swords. Let's have a look. I don't know why I want to say Don Quixote. It's probably not him. Knight of Swords. A horse rider, full in armor, gallop wildly in a desolate landscape. Peacock feathers are at the knight's helmet, and on the horse's head is a red dragon. Another oriental symbol, the yin-yang sign, is at the horse's flank. Let me focus for you. On the front of the horse is a fierce face. The knight's foot is bare, although he wears a dangerously pointed spur on it. The spiked collar of a watchdog clatters on the horse's leg. On the ground is a broken arrow and 3 flowers, one of which grows through a skull. Okay, so it's probably not Don Quixote. I love the magenta, this sort of this purplish, this turquoisey colors, especially in the wing of the Lover's card. I shall go back to that. I think this might be this way. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a big fan of Scapini. Any deck by Scapini, which artworks by Scapini, I usually would try to get. And I don't care so much about whether they read well or not, because I just find him very, very amusing. I think that is the artist, that is Scapini, his wife, and their then baby daughter, I think. Isn't that cute? I wonder where he is now. I know he was a working artist, illustrating a variety of things, so that we recognize that figure, don't we? From the 9 of coins there. Pixie's depiction of the 9 of coins. So there's... I mean, if you see potential for storytelling, usually images speak for themselves. They say images speak louder than words. What do they call it? No, action speaks louder than word, but paintings or images speak 1,000 words, or something like that. But you know what I mean. So if illustration is well done, it's sort of speak for itself, is what I'm trying to say. So I wonder who the King of Coin is. Is anybody in particular? I am quite nervous about losing my privacy here. So the King of Coins has the features of one of the last Doge of Venice, Francesco Morosini. He is old and white-haired, and his rich cloak is embroidered with thorny branches, illustrating the impossibility of maintaining even the best of worldly institutions. In his left hand is a compass, and in his right is a phoenix of hope and resurrection. In his lap is a rat sack of gold coins. 7 open sacks around the throne reveals diamonds, gold rings, crowns, court crystals, pearls, gold coins, and gold ingots. In the background are the well-tended fields of the kingdom. So that's a bit about Luigi Scappini. Sorry about the glare. Luigi Scappini, creator of the medieval Scapini Tarot, was born 1946 and has been an artist since the age of 12, both as a sculptor and as a painter. Since 1964, his work had been exhibited in many major European and American cities, including New York, Paris, London, Milan, Rome, Florence, Ravenna, and Geneva. Scappini's versatility encompasses fantasy scenes, portraiture, mandalas, and of course tarot. The artist has illustrated several books, and his work in the Casa di Risparmio edition of Pinocchio, Verona, 1982, was received with great critical acclaim. Scappini recreated the quote-unquote missing cards from the hand-painted 15th century Carrie Yale and Pierpont Morgan Bergamo tarocchi decks for the reproduction of the decks published in 1984 by US Game System Incorporated, New York. Luigi Scappini now lives in Verona with his wife Claudia and their 2 daughters, Giulia and Camilla. About the tarot, the artists say the tarot is a book in which everything can be written. I have always been interested in symbols, including them in my paintings. Many symbols that I quote-unquote invented intuitively were affirmed by my discovery that they had been used by other artists long ago. In the tarot, symbols can be superimposed and combined in the imagination. Sometimes a seemingly random combination will certainly bring a new insight to the reader of the cards, leading to yet other associations. Scappini's fantastical tarot, whose intricate symbolism is animated by the chaos of everyday life, provides a perfect medium to transport the card reader back to medieval times. And so that, my beautiful people, is the Scapini Tarot. Again, in terms of edition, I can only show you what it says here in the booklet. The copyright is indeed 1985, but which printing this is perhaps is informed by these arrays of numbers over here. I let you freeze that and embark on your own investigation. And so have fun, and I'll talk to you guys later.